So when does college football start? Soon? Welcome in, everyone, to the Voice of College Football on a Thursday evening. And depending on what part of the country you're in, I got to think most of the country, it's not feeling like 5:30 in the afternoon. It's feeling like midnight. It looks like midnight, feels like midnight. Can't wait to get out of these winter doldrums. But let's spice it up. Let's lift it up. Let's bring this thing to life. And, of course, look at the bright side. Hopefully you are healthy and safe and everything is good in your life, or most things are good in your life. The important things are good in your life. We'll state it that way. And we can all have a good time here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody who can make the call-in show. The phone lines are open, 860-499-3332. We will have a live stream tonight as well with the Wholesome One on the Miami channel at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So that is a set date on the Miami channel each and every Thursday night with the Wholesome One at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Cam Underwood's our guy on Wednesday night on the Miami channel at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And Cam, as usual, delivered last night. I hope you were able to catch that live stream. And, of course, Wednesdays are our foot to the throttle, to the floor, kick it in, knock out 6 live streams on a typical Wednesday, make that 5, and sometimes there's another one in there. So hopefully, again, you guys are good to go tonight. Okay, there's so much to talk about in the world of college football. I put 3 items in the title. One deals with Stetson Bennett, who has decided, how dare him, he has decided to come back to Georgia to play another season. I don't think anybody's guaranteed him a starting position at quarterback despite winning a national championship. When was the last time a national championship winning quarterback came back the next season and was not guaranteed of his job? But I would think that Stetson Bennett is not guaranteed the starting job at Georgia, and that's fine, and that's the way it should be. But for some reason, all sorts of Georgia fans are all up in arms about Stetson Bennett wanting to come back and deciding to come back to play football at Georgia. I just posted a video. Please check it out on the Georgia quarterback situation minus JT Daniels. And with Stetson Bennett still on board. And also understand it that I attacked it from the standpoint of all the backlash that I've seen on social media. Social media. Oh, my goodness. It is just too bad that we need social media to do what we're doing here. Because, man, what an evil that has become in this society. Good Lord. Good Lord. But anyway, all the backlash on social media against Stetson Bennett exercising his right to come back to lead a team that he led to a national championship, regardless of what your evaluation is on how well he played and how big a factor he was and how important he was, and if they could have done it with somebody else at quarterback, or how bad or good he is, that he was the starting quarterback, and in much more impressive fashion than, let's say, Trent Dilfer for the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, delivered a national championship and was integral in delivering the national championship at many key points this season, including the playoffs and the national championship game. For some reason, Georgia fans are up in arms. JT Daniels, the guy that won some meaningless games for Georgia at the quarterback spot, played relatively well. Really not decidedly better than Stetson Bennett, nor did Stetson Bennett play decidedly better than JT Daniels. For some reason, it's been the worst, just worst, catastrophic move in the history of the university that JT Daniels is entered in the transfer portal. And Stetson Bennett, who, let me remind you, oh yeah, won the national championship at Georgia, is coming back. So I will not state anything more about this situation. I posted a video just about an hour ago, and it has less to do with, I evaluate Stetson Bennett's play. I evaluate JT Daniels' play and how we arrived at this place. I am not going into Kirby Smart's history of evaluating, developing, and making a decision on the quarterback role. I've talked about that many times in the past. I do defend Kirby Smart for very obvious reasons. I lay out Stetson Bennett's skill set, JT Daniels' skill set, and it's more of a tongue lashing to the Georgia fans. And if you're a Georgia fan out there listening right now, watching me right now, and you are taking a wait and see approach, if you're taking a logical approach, if you're even one of the few, and maybe I say this incorrectly because the volume, just the mass and the volume of feedback on social media sometimes drowns out the silent majority that we don't hear from. And I got to think that there are far more Stetson Bennett supporters and Georgia fans who are just, regardless of whether they're big Stetson Bennett fans, are just happy all of 10 days later that they won a national championship, that they're not so hypersensitive and focused and just paranoid about next season already, that they can just kind of be happy and celebrate and say, you know what, we trust Kirby Smart. So check out the video on Stetson Bennett. We can certainly talk about it if anyone calls or leaves an intelligent or insightful or humorous. We need some humor today. I'll speak for myself. I've heard so many disturbing things on the American social and political and life scene, real life scene today, but that's every day that we could take some humor. All right. So there's Stetson Bennett, JT Daniels in the Georgia situation, also with Jermaine Burton, the fine wide receiver, entering the transfer portal as well at Georgia. We have that. We have playoff expansion talk that is really just talk right now. And because of dissenting views from the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12, the ACC being the most vocal, it appears as though, although just about everybody wants a playoff, if I took a poll right now about whether we want a playoff and to expand the playoff, I believe that that mission, that initiative would pass at least 85% to 15%, that for some reason these conferences can't get together. And if I'm hearing correctly out of the Big Ten of what their issue is, it seems like I want to say this about 8 times a day. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But in reality, it's only the stupidest thing I've heard in about the last 15 minutes. So that, again, that speaks to the state of our society. That is, it seems like the stupidest thing that you could hear in the last 15 minutes or in a lifetime, but it's the stupidest thing in like the last 15 minutes. And that would be that the Big Ten is holding this up. Not the only one, but one of the factions that is holding up playoff expansion because they want to protect the Power 5 conference champions and the highest ranked group of 5. And they're caught up in the semantics and possible difference between giving automatic entry to the top 6 conferences versus the Power 5 and the other top-ranked conference. Big Ten, do a history. Here's a history lesson for you. Do some research. It's the same thing. And if it's not the same thing, you're not in jeopardy. And if you have an issue or believe that you're in jeopardy of falling to the seventh highest ranked conference champion, then Big Ten, you've got more problems than trying to tweak a college football playoff. If you believe that your champion is going to be the 7th highest ranked or the 4th lowest ranked out of all the conferences, then Big Ten, you're really forecasting your doom and need to focus on some other things and just let this playoff issue go. So we've got playoff expansion talk. We've got Stetson Bennett, JT Daniels, and anything else involving the transfer portal. We talked to an LSU guy today, and we are, of course, recording segments for our other channels. So many of you only watch the main channel, and that's fine. But do keep in mind that we've got team channels for 25 teams. So even in a particular day when it seems like, oh, Mark just tossed out one video. No, I didn't just toss out one video. That's just one video here on the main channel. We are producing multiple videos for 25 channels every day, all the time, nonstop. So if you get a favorite football team, most likely we've got a team channel for you. So please check those out. And we had a great conversation with Power Hour, Mr. Carter, on LSU today. That's going to be posted soon. Check out very informative and entertaining conversation with David Waters from Gators Breakdown. We released that today as well, talking Florida football and Billy Napier making big moves. Every coach that wants to survive and succeed is going to have to make big moves. That's it. Dabo, do you hear? You got to at some point. And I'm kind of a Dabo fan. I've never called myself that. Probably shouldn't have just done that. That might be a little bit strong, but I generally support and agree with and see Dabo Swinney as a good guy and I don't know the man. So if something comes out tomorrow, don't say, well, Mark, you said he was a great guy. I don't know the man. I'm just talking about what we've been exposed to in the public. That I like Dabo Swinney. I think he's good for college football, and he's definitely good for Clemson. But the transfer portal may need to be used. He used it this week to grab back Hunter Johnson at quarterback, the former 5-star who went to Northwestern for 4 years. So there's a lot with the transfer portal. That's on the table. College football playoff expansion, the Stetson Bennett, JT Daniels, Georgia quarterback room. And we also have our conference rankings that are being released. So please check those out. We've released the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12, and also the initial video, which outlines our system. All right. Any calls coming in at this point? Yes, sir, there are. Let's get to it right here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP. How you doing?
The real MVP. I'm doing well. How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's going good.
Cool.
Sounds like you need to stay off social media some. Sound a little bit depressing today, man.
It's
stay
every
off
day.
it for
it's every
3
day.
days.
I can't stay off of it. Yeah. I'm running a business. I would love to stay off of it.
Well,
I can't. I can't make money and stay off social media. That would be like, Mark, why don't you stop producing videos or doing live streams for a month? Can't do that.
Okay,
unfortunately.
Well,
I would love to.
Unfortunate.
I lost my Facebook account. This was in June. It must have been the previous June, 2020. And I didn't work extremely hard to get it back, and it's still kind of up in the air of why I lost it, but I was able to retrieve it or start a new one and get it back. But for the 6 months, something in that range, at least 6 months that I didn't have it, oh, it was a joy. It was great.
Well, I'm glad you at least had to cherish 6 months.
Oh, it was, I generally consider myself a very at peace person, that I'm peaceful. I don't get riled up by a lot of things, and I'm not that disturbed or shaken or moved by too much out there. But I just found myself, once I was released from that, to be like, you know what? I've got a little bit more peace of mind now. I'm not exposed to a bunch of morons that just rail on people all the time.
Yeah, social media is undefeated in consuming people's happiness and joy.
Yes,
It's like
that's a
Father
good way to
Time.
put
It's
it.
undefeated.
And it's one of those
So
things that the last thing I'll say about it is it's not social media, of course. Social media, the actual technology is neutral. It can be, and it is used for good. There is good that comes from it, but unfortunately, that's outweighed like 99-1.
right, that's eloquently put. But let me talk to you about some actual college football, Mark,
Yes.
since that's why we're all here. What are your thoughts on possibly Jim Harbaugh going to the Raiders?
I believe that if I was Jim Harbaugh, and let's say all things being equal, meaning I don't necessarily have some great desire to live in Las Vegas or my family, or that there's nothing on the periphery that is keeping me close to Michigan or pushing me away. So let's consider that all neutral, that it's all about football and it's not about money. Let's say the money's exactly the same. It's all about football, assessing where do I want to be from a football standpoint. What I'd be asking myself if I was Jim Harbaugh is what we just pulled off in 2021. Am I going to be able to do that on a fairly regular basis? Of course, there's a team to the south that can challenge that. So it's not like I don't think anybody expects Michigan to win the Big Ten like 8 out of the next 10 years, but where we are seriously challenging all the time and I'm winning my share of Big Ten championships and getting to the playoffs. Do I reasonably think that that's in my future here? And based on getting my head kicked in by 23 points, and it was much worse than that in the playoff, do I think that I can elevate this program to where even if I am getting to the playoff, I don't want to be a national embarrassment every 2 or 3 years, losing on a national stage and getting my head kicked in. So can I elevate the program to compete with Alabama and Georgia and whomever else is going to be on that stage? That's the question I would be asking myself. And if I could be honest with myself and say, I think I've taken this about as far as I can. I just don't have enough football players in this state and in this region, and I can only draw so many out of Texas and Florida and California, then I'm going to move on.
Okay. And do you think the Raiders being a dysfunctional program or a football team as of lately has any impact on the decision?
So the Raiders have a history since the beginning of time. I think it's just in the genes. And of course, Al Davis's son is running the Raiders. So it's ingrained in the franchise that you got to take the good with the bad. There's lunacy, but at the same time, there's obviously a winning tradition at various times in the past. Okay. Aside from the John Gruden situation, and of course that's isolated, that was all him. He's gone. Do we know that this is a dysfunctional franchise right now? Otherwise,
well, they don't have a GM and they don't have a head coach. I would consider that pretty dysfunctional.
well, if you fire a coach, you don't have a coach, so that's fairly common practice. But yeah, typically you want to hire the GM before the coach. And I understand. I didn't know exactly why they fired Mike Mayock. He seemed to be doing a pretty good job. They just went to the playoffs.
I don't know, to be honest with you. And they got very passionate. They probably have the second or third most passionate fan base in the entire NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always the villains. So I'm not sure do you think that villain role would suit Jim Harbaugh?
Jim Harbaugh is not villain of sorts in any kind of menacing way. He's just kind of an oddball villain.
That's a good way to put it, Mark. And I'm going to shift gears to a different topic.
Okay.
And this is something I've thought about. How come nobody's given any love to Oklahoma State all season? Like, they've just flown under the radar. One had probably their best season ever.
You're right.
Won the Fiesta Bowl, beat Notre Dame. How come nobody's talking about it?
Because most people think it was a one-time deal and they're going to go back to 8-4 status and just be who they always seem to be. I don't think there's any hope or optimism that this is an upward trend that's going to continue.
Yeah, but I mean, for most programs, even just that one time, I mean, that's amazing. You know how hard it is to be that on that top for once, to win a New Year's Six Bowl? I mean, they represent the middle team so well. I mean, especially with the Big 12 and Oklahoma's down, Texas is down. There needs to be somebody to fill the power vacuum. And I mean, Baylor's up there. Oklahoma State should be up there.
Well,
they're not even mentioned in the conversation.
Well, consider who just beat them in the Big 12 championship game and won a Sugar Bowl. So shouldn't we be applauding
Yeah, but it was
Baylor?
it wasn't. Yeah, but it wasn't by like a dominant score or anything. It was by half a yard.
Sure. Yeah. But my point is that overall, Oklahoma State has been a better football program than Baylor most of the time.
Right.
So why wouldn't we applaud Baylor's accomplishments considering that they were greater than Oklahoma State's?
Oh, I'm not trying to push down Baylor. I'm just trying to elevate Oklahoma State.
Okay.
Because I don't think it has to be a zero-sum game. It's just nobody, from what I've seen anywhere, has talked about Oklahoma State and their great season. And that's all I was just wondering.
Well, I do also think that we're in a society and just a mindset that once the season's over, meaning Oklahoma State beat Notre Dame and they beat them on the same day as, was that on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day?
That was the first game on New Year's Day.
New Year's Day. So the playoffs were the night before, and then that led right into the Rose Bowl. And obviously at that point, we were thinking we got our playoff result. We're looking forward to the national championship game. Just overall, there's a mindset that, shoot, I think about producing videos, let's say, if you can make this connection, about bowl season, you know, the 10 best bowl games, the 10 best bowl players, that sort of thing. And if that sits on my mind and I don't get to it for a day or two after the season's over, and since the bowl games are separated so much from the national championship that once the national championship's played, I figure I'm not going to put that out there. Nobody cares at this point. It's over. I think everybody has such a mindset toward, well, Oklahoma State won the Fiesta Bowl. Great. Let's see some highlights and great. Good for them in 2022.
Okay, then that's a little bit depressing, Mark, to be honest with you.
It is.
But yeah.
There's a lot of things about this sport, for as great as it is, that are kind of depressing. And one of them is a lot of people are only happy with a national championship and only concerned about a national championship. And they can't really embrace or celebrate just the day-to-day and the other bowl games and the other competition. And if it doesn't involve the playoff, then it's just kind of a bother. And those teams are trash and garbage. And that's that narrative. And the other one is exactly that people want to flip the page and move on to the next thing immediately.
Well, that's fair enough, I guess, for those people. Did I hear you say that the Big Ten, the reason they didn't want playoff expansion is because they were afraid of being the seventh best conference?
Well, I'll say it this way. I don't know if you caught the explanation. And so this was just confirmed on Feinbaum's show by whatever writer he had on. And I've heard it elsewhere. And I just wanted to make sure that I was hearing this the right way, because I heard this out of the Pac-12, and considering their plight, their
Yeah, I was gonna
situation,
say.
I can understand them, but I guess the Big Ten is kind of taking up for them, or I don't know why they would need to be concerned about this. But you talk about nitpicking, where the proposal on the table is that they take the top 6 conference champions, the top 6 ranked conference champions, period, regardless of where they come from. And they're meaning the Big Ten and the Pac-12, fighting for, we need to protect the 5 in the Power 5 and then one additional. Meaning they're concerned about a Power 5 being left out of the top 6 ranked, which would mean for that to happen, you would have to be the 7th highest ranked conference champion. And even as bad as the Pac-12 has been, I can almost guarantee that that's never happened. So I don't know what they're worried about.
The worst year of the Pac-12.
Yeah, it is the worst.
I don't even think they're 7th.
If anyone cares to watch my videos, I outlined how bad the Pac-12 is.
Yeah.
And so for them to be concerned about that, fine. You don't have a whole lot of faith in yourselves to pick yourselves up and become something again, number one. Number two, why would the Big Ten be concerned? I have no idea.
Yeah, when you said that, I mean, I got the words that were coming out of your mouth, but they didn't make sense, because with the Big Ten, that's so far from unlikely scenarios. That is 0%. Now, the Pac-12, I get it, because, I mean, if they have another year like they had this year, I mean, it's rough. I mean, you got, in my opinion, one of the most important games for next year is going to be Utah at Florida. Because if Florida beats Utah, I mean, the Pac-12, I mean, you could basically just write off the entire conference. I hate to say it, but that's how bad they've been. So,
yeah.
And if you want to protect the the Power 5, Pac-12 gets better. Just have one team be good. Just one. Just one team. They can't even have that. So, Mark, I'm going to let you go. Have a great rest of your show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the call. You have a good night.
No problem. You do the same.
That team is USC. USC is waiting in the wings. USC is the possible savior. And it's not just because they're USC and, okay, they got a new coach and they should be better, but Lincoln Riley is actually doing work and getting them better as we speak. They are getting better right now. All right. Well, thanks for calling the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. This is Ian from Akron.
Ian, what's going on?
Not much, Mark. Trying to cook dinner, but also calling you at the same time. I thought I was going to beat the real MVP, but that guy is ambitious.
He's on it.
I really appreciate him. So I don't want to talk about Stetson Bennett, but if you won a national championship for the first time in 40 years for your team, why are they complaining about him? I don't understand how that makes any rational sense. I know that there's going to be people that are more talented. I understand why they complained about him before, but can they be grateful for at least a couple weeks and let him make his own decisions?
It would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because for me, I mean, usually the most talented or the guys with a lot of stats, you know, yes. Do they have great seasons? Do they win games? Yes, but it doesn't always equate to that. For instance, okay, let's just take for a second. Say Craig Krenzel had another chance to come back for another year after he won the championship. I don't think Craig Krenzel ever threw for 350 yards. I don't think Craig Krenzel ever threw more than 15 touchdowns in a season. I don't think he threw much more than 2,000 yards in a season, but did he win a national championship for his football team for the first time in 34 years or something like that? So I'm just saying I don't understand where that comes from. Maybe it's a different day and age. We just have so much social media and recruiting rankings and all these things going on, and maybe I was only 13 years old when that happened, but when that happened, I would have never thought for one second if Craig Krenzel could come back, I would say no. Like, he had the it factor. He was tough. He wanted to win games, and it was a miracle type of season. But what does it matter if you have a bunch of talent all around you, just like Krenzel did? You're not the greatest quarterback. We've already kind of established that with these kind of teams. You don't have to have the best quarterback if you got a bunch of talent around you, but if you don't have a bunch of talent around you, you should probably have one of the best quarterbacks. So I don't want to spend time on that. I already did, but I just don't understand how they can't be grateful for that guy and his story and what he's done. So I'd say let him come back. He'd learn from his mistakes. You never know how the season's going to go, but I would imagine he'd learn from his mistakes. You know how much that man, as a young man, has learned this year?
Yeah.
So that's all I really have to say about that one. Harbaugh, I don't want to talk about it too much, but I think you touch on this a lot of times when people ask you questions. You're not going to try to tell anybody else what people's desires and motivations are. You don't know what they are. Who knows what Jim Harbaugh really wants? I mean, he might want to go back to the NFL and win a Super Bowl. If I was him, I'd want to be at Michigan, but at the same time, that guy, none of us have made $8 million a year. We don't know what it's like to be offered 11 and say, now I have a choice. So I don't know, that conversation, I'd want to stay at Michigan if I was Jim Harbaugh. But who knows what's going to go on with people's desires and motivations. And honestly, I don't even care about Jim Harbaugh. If he comes back, I don't think we're going to have a problem with beating Michigan. So, sorry, I rambled that off real quick. But so you talk about the playoffs a lot, and I feel like I have a pretty good idea how you feel. So 12 game is out because I don't like buys either. I'll agree with you on that. It just doesn't make sense for college football to me. So then that leaves 8 or 16 would be the most rational thing. But you think 16 is too much, Mark?
Well, I got to say, Ian, that I'm still kind of reeling from the comment that you made, considering your rousing speech the last time you called, that you don't think I'm reeling in $8 million on YouTube here.
Oh, well, if you are, then I'm very happy for you because, like I said, Mark, you're doing it better than most people.
We're not quite there.
Well, I mean, what's that?
We're not quite there.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there. And speaking of the real MVP, I think, whenever you need some marketing help, I don't know what that – I've never met the guy, but I think that guy, he'll definitely help build your brand, but that's a whole nother subject for another day.
So, yeah, back to the playoffs. I would love – so you're right. I am against buys. I'm not going to go through the full spiel right now, but for anybody who would like to hear me go on about buys and the reason why it's even more egregious, the advantage, the unfair advantage is much more egregious than just the obvious that the team that doesn't play gets a pass to the next round. You can search on this channel for a video that I just think is titled No Buys. So that limits us to 4, 8, 16. Well, if we were playing with human beings that were incapable of getting hurt, let's say the wear and tear was no factor, nothing like that, and we were just talking about let's put together the best system to determine a champion, I would love to see 16 teams in the playoffs. Would love it. But if you put that playoff system together, I think you have to pare back the regular season. So that leaves us with 8.
Okay.
So I'm good with 8. I'm not crazy about it, but eight's fine. I just want to see all the conference champions protected, all the major conference champions. This is what I want to see. Scheduling fixed. I won't go into that because, again, I've got a scheduling system, and we'll talk about that in the next few months. I want to see scheduling fixed because I think that precludes everything else. To have a fair approach to the playoff, you need to fix the scheduling and make it as fair and equitable as possible. So scheduling, number 1.
Agreed.
Number 2, make a decision on the group of 5. So I like these playoff models that are being proposed because they address the group of 5 specifically. And because we've lived in this gray area of, well, they're included, they're considered, but they're not really considered until this year, in which there was an overwhelming conclusion to allow one to make the playoff finally, that there has to make a decision. Are we formally including the group of 5 or formally excluding the group of 5? Make a decision one way or the other. And then the next one is just, I want the conference champions protected. I believe that they've earned a right into the playoff.
Right. So for me, I agree with you completely. Buys do not make sense. But I was thinking about this the other day. If you go to the championship right now, you've played 15 games, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you have a 16-team playoff, assuming that however many of them have already played 13 games, right? So how many games would the champion play in a 16-game playoff? They'd play 16, correct?
The 2 teams that would make the national championship game would play 4 extra games, correct? Because you'd have to play 1 to get down to 8, 2 to get down to 4, the third game to get down to 2, and then the championship game.
Okay, am I missing something? I thought it was 16. It would be 16 to win the championship. I might be wrong, though. So, okay. I was just thinking that they were going to play 16 games, so what's one more game for a champion? I mean, for the majority of teams would not, in college football and the whole landscape, would not play more games. It'd be for what? Only a few teams out of 130.
Yeah, so that's a great point.
Games.
I've made that point many times. That's a great point because people go crazy that like everybody's playing 16 games. No. 2 teams are playing 16 games.
No, they're not.
And 4, it extrapolates out, but basically nobody's playing extra games except for 16 out of 130. And then 8 of them are only going to play 1 additional game. So that's just like a bowl game. So only 8 of them are playing anything more than what would just be a bowl game.
Right. So I guess my point was when people say 16 is too many games, I don't think that's a real rational argument just because you're only asking a few teams to play more games. I mean, only right now, how many teams play in a conference championship? 20?
Yes.
We're talking about 10 conferences? Okay. So 20 teams play 13 games. Like what at that point in the season. So you're talking about, would that not mean that 110 teams do only play 12?
Well, it also depends on how you select the 16 teams, because if you go by the rankings then most of those conference champions are not included. They're from the MAC and the Sun Belt, and they're not going to be included. If you're talking about the top 16 teams in the country as viewed by the College Football Playoff Committee, let's say, they're going to be loaded up in the SEC and the Big Ten, etc. And there's going to be probably 2 group of 5 teams, maybe only 1. I posted a video. I went through all the playoff years, and I went through the 16-team playoff, the 2 ways you could do it. Well, you could do it a bunch of ways, but 2 basic ways, and that's you go by the playoff committee's rankings, and that's going to give you more SEC, Big Ten, et cetera, the power brands, or you could go the 10 conference champions and then 6 wild cards.
Right, which was one of the points I want to talk about. I guess my main point with that was the normal argument of that's too many games. I just been saying that I don't know if people are really realizing that for the people that are going to the championship, it's not that much more. Or the teams that are going to the championship, it's not that much more, and most teams only play 12 games anyway. So I think that gets a little blown out of proportion. I know it's a long season. I just think it's a bit blown out of proportion because you're just having a few more games for the top contenders. But like you said, are you? I guess my question is: are you more in favor of? From what you said, you're more in favor of taking all of the conference champions and making them and feeding them over having a ranking system if we extended the playoff, correct?
I think it would be.
I mean,
how do I phrase this?
This is why it's hard. Because
it is.
We're trying, like you always say, and I always say, are we trying to figure out who the best team in college football is? Are we putting the best teams in college football into a playoff? Because, for instance, you can take all the conference champions. That doesn't necessarily mean they're the best teams. We saw it this year. We've seen it many years. So that's where I'm at. I want to extend the playoff because I want to do the same thing as you. I want to give opportunities to teams because we're going to have upsets. Alabama's going to lose one time when that happens. Ohio State's going to lose. We see it during the regular season all the time. Why wouldn't you see it in a playoff game? I mean, it's just going to happen. So whether it's 8 or 16, obviously they have different implications, but I don't know. Do you want to see the 6th best team in the nation in the playoff, or do you want to see a conference champion that might not be able to contend at all? I mean, I guess that's the biggest part of the argument for me, and you talk about it a lot. So,
well, I think that the Power 5 champions are always amongst the 16 best teams in the country. So in the first model, if you're just going to take the highest ranked 16 teams, that's going to be loaded up with the Big Ten and the SEC, et cetera, and it's probably going to have, most years, it's going to have a group of 5, and it might have another group of 5. Again, I've run it through about 8 seasons, and usually it's one group of 5, maybe it's 2. This season, it would have been just Cincinnati. I don't think another team would have squeezed into the top 16 going into the bowls, maybe Houston. So if you're just strictly going to leave the authority on a committee, I don't like that they're going to control college football again, and they're going to tell us who the 16 best teams in the country. At least I've got the comfort in knowing if you can't make a top 16, then you know what, forget it. The best teams in college football will be there. Now, whether they should be ranked, 3 instead of 6 or 4 instead of 5 or whatever, they can't screw that up. They just can't screw that. I might have an issue with, I might be on here with a 16-team playoff selected by the committee saying, I don't think the 16th or number 16 team's right. I think it should be this because of X, Y, and Z. But the best teams in the country are going to the top 13 or 14 for sure are going to be in the playoff.
Exactly. And we know that there's usually only 3 that really are elite. So would you say that if you had a 16 team playoff, the best way to do it was you would prefer to have the 10 conference champions?
Okay, so if you're going to go with
Instead
that
of
model, let's face it. Okay, you've got the 5 Power 5 champions, and even in a weak Pac-12 year, Utah's probably, they were one of the top 16 teams in the country. So you got that Power 5, and then you've got 5 other conference champions. They could go anywhere. They can range anywhere from Cincinnati being legit to Northern Illinois out of the MAC being 9-4, 9-5. They were this year. And what are they? The 60th best team in the country. So you're going to, in that model, you're going to have the 5 champions from the Power 5, and you're going to have 6 wild cards that are going to be loaded up on the SEC, the Big Ten, etc. So
and one of them is going to be Notre Dame.
Okay, yeah, most likely, most seasons. So you know that 11 of those 16 are the 11 best teams in the country. You're pretty safe with that assumption that out of those 16 teams in that model, 11 of them are the best teams in the country. And then you're going to have like the 23rd best team in the country out of the Mountain West, who's the champion. And when I'm throwing out these numbers, I'm just within a range. And you're going to have the MAC champion, who's like the 60th best team in the country, and the Sun Belt champion, who's like the 45th best team in the country. So you're just going to have to live with that we are honoring conference champions, and we're including everyone. And those teams earned it. And we're going to give them a shot. And if you can't make that playoff as well, if you're in the Power 5 and you can't be one of the top 11 teams, that's why I'm okay with that.
So you are okay with just conference champions in a 16-team playoff?
Absolutely. That would be fun.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm thinking.
In the first one, you get more brand name matchups. Again, I've run this through the playoff era to see. You get more of a Penn State being number 14 in the country and being in the playoff and playing whoever, and you get a lot more possibilities of Florida and Auburn and Penn State and Wisconsin and schools like that making it. And in the other model, you're going to have about 4 less of them, and you're going to have these conference champions from the MAC and the Sun Belt and Conference USA. And a higher likelihood that you're going to have a 52-10 game in the first round between Western Kentucky and Clemson.
Right, but we never know because we've watched Appalachian State beat Michigan regular season. So I guess I'm asking because I think everybody has this. They want to throw out, I like 4 teams, or I like 8 teams, or I like 12 or 16. But yeah, they often forget. Okay, well, where are we basing it off of? I think basing it off of 16, like you've always said, allows every FBS champion of their conference to be in the playoff and be represented, and they deserve it. They earned it. In an 8, you can't represent all of them in an 18 playoff because there's 10. So then that's just Power 5 plus Group of 5, if we want to go into that conversation, and 2 wild cards. So the point, what is better? I mean, that's really because I can see the argument for both of them. But another point that it brings up to me is, why do we even have? I mean, I understand from a talent level and everything that we have Power 5 and we have Group of 5. But let's think about it for a second here. You have it used to be Division 1A and Division 1 AA. So now that's called what? FBS and FCS. Okay. I'm not old enough to remember if when it was Division 1A, did we have the Power Five and the Group of Five, Mark?
No, nobody. I don't know where that
Right.
term came up. At what point that came up? This Group of Five phrase, sometime during the BCS era, I guess, or maybe during the playoff era. But nobody referred to the MAC as the Group of Five.
Yeah, I think it must have been political in some type of way to create. I mean, they already knew who Texas and Ohio State and those kind of blue blood teams were, but I don't know where that came from, and I think it creates even more complexity to the situation. And I agree with you 100%. But here's the problem: if you're not going to include the Group of Five in whichever playoff system you come up with, then why are they even considered 1A football? Why are they considered a FBS team if you're not going to include them? Despite the fact that they're obviously on a different level of talent and their financial situations and the money they have to use and all that. Why are they in the same, like you said, I think before, you said give them their own playoff then. Because we're either going to include them and say, you're always going to be looking for scraps and we'll let one of you in, or have your own thing. What makes more sense? Because there are going to be years where they're never going to contend. There are going to be some years that maybe you have one contender. And you also said, let's look at results. Let them in for the next 5 years. And if they get beat up every year, then we know that it's not going to work. Then you got to change it again. What's better? Get your own. Why are they considered? You're going to separate Power Five and Group of Five, but then consider them both football bowl subdivision teams. So why are they separated within the same category? Doesn't make much sense to me.
I would be more supportive of excluding the Group of Five if there was more of a dividing line between the Power Five and the Group of Five. But we well know that even though the Power Five is significantly better overall, there's not just one outlier from the Group of Five that's better. You can take 20 Group of Five teams that are better than 20, roughly, whatever the number, 12, 15.
You're right. I misspoke.
Yeah.
You're right.
Boise State's consistently better than 3, 4, 5, 8 teams, whatever, in most of the Power Five conferences, and Cincinnati at times, and Houston at times, and Memphis at times, and are better than, like, if we could list out all the Power Five teams, and the very worst is Kansas, and they're better than the best team in the Group of Five, and there was this straight delineation between the two, then I'd say, you know what, they need to go play their own playoff. But there is such an overlap between the upper tier of the Group of Five, the San Diego States, and all those, we could go on and on and on, being better than the bottom of the Power Five, that I think that I have no issue with them being given a shot, but not as much of a shot.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with them being given a shot.
They have to be champions.
Because how do you not give people a shot or teams a shot when it's 130 teams? Like, I think it's a college football problem in general. You know what I mean? Like, that's really the issue. I guess I was trying to say that it's strange that we even break up FBS into different groups. But I understand why we do, because, like you said, huge delineation, even between Group of Five teams and even between Power Five teams. So give them a shot. So I guess my question is your solution is make sure that one of them is formally included, whether you have an 8 or 16 team.
Yes.
Well, let's just say 8. Let's not go too far.
Yes.
That's the solution.
The highest ranked.
I would agree with that.
I wouldn't even go with the highest ranked. I don't even want the playoff committee involved in it. But I would take
Yeah, the committee.
I'm basically taking the group of 5 champion with the best record. And then if there's a tie for the best record, then I'm going head to head, and then I'm going with the strength of record metric, and that's my group of 5 team.
And you're trying to be as objective as possible in a realm that's with the committee is subjective, and also on top of it, you have 130 teams to try to be subjective with, to try to be objective with.
Yep.
So you're taking 130 teams, the entire landscape of college football, and try to be objective with it. It's obviously different than a league like the NFL, which everybody touches on. So I think that's the challenge for everybody. I mean, there's a lot of smart people in college football, but despite the politics, the money, and everything involved. So if Mark Rogers tomorrow ban the playoff, would you say that's your preference? 8 teams, you take the Power 5, and then you got 2 outliers and 1 group of 5. That's your solution at the moment.
My solution would be, yes. My next stage in this would be the Power 5 champions in the 18 playoff. But I love that 16 as well.
I agree with that.
All right, Ian, I'm going to let you go and move on to other calls here. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Ian. Have a good one. All right. Let's keep it going here. The voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Oh, it's me, Mark. I don't want to waste much of your time. I noticed last time I called in that people got kind of mad at me for staying on so long, so I don't.
Well, that's okay. That's not your fault. I made that decision, so don't worry about that.
Well,
good to hear from you, Chris.
Well,
take your time.
Well, I don't, like I said, people want to know the division between G5 and P5. I kind of went back and I don't know when it started either. I think what it was even before the BCS, I think they had, and I don't know who it would have been. Just generally speaking, people would classify the programs either as major or mid-major.
Yeah.
So that was it was kind of the same status, I guess. And I get pretty much the same result from that status to the one that they're using now. It's 3-2, but it doesn't really make sense because it's kind of confusing. But basically, it translates into that's what I was trying to explain to you before. The baseline for the P5 is the 60% against the 40% for G5, and so as long as they stay within that range, that's kind of where they fall, is between 40 and 60%. But the separation is 2-1. Actually, it's in other words, Power 5 teams are about twice on average. I mean, I'm taking the whole group together, but on average, are about twice as good. So it is a fairly substantial difference between those two. I guess you could call them divisions, but I don't know what else to call it other than just division as far as the way they play. And I guess if you wanted to have a separate championship, one way to do that might be kind of like I was trying to tell you before, even though you don't probably like it, have a separate championship for the P5, kind of like the BCS would have. And then whatever the G5, it's actually 1 year. I think they actually had that happen. It was 2008, I think, or maybe 2009. Texas Christian played Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. That was almost like having a separate title. And people didn't really talk about it like that, but it was like the G5 championship, even though I think Texas Christian, I don't think they were a G5, but Boise State won. And so it was the year Alabama beat Texas in the championship game.
Well, they were a G5. Neither one of those teams were in a Power 5 conference at the time.
Texas wasn't, Christian? I don't know.
No,
anyway,
that was before they joined the Big 12.
Yeah, but they were kind of an outlier, Mark. That was kind of the thing about Texas Christian. They were, I know they probably were in the WAC or something like that, but, the WAC really wasn't. That's kind of what's weird about Texas Christian. They were always kind of on the cusp of being, even when they weren't. They were in the WAC for a while, and then they went into the Mountain West, I think, and then the Conference USA. And But every time they were in those conferences were actually quite a bit better than average. So they were actually almost always in a, I mean, I'm not going to say they were in a power conference, but relatively speaking, they kind of were. I mean, Texas Christian in particular, when they were in the WAC, I mean, I don't know how good the WAC was, but it wasn't like the WAC was like kind of what the WAC became. The WAC kind of became not as good after some of those teams left. But when they were in the WAC, like around 2000 or so, you know, the WAC actually was relatively decent. I mean, I'm not going to like promote the WAC because I mean, I don't even think the WAC exists anymore, but I think they might come back. You know, there's talk that there's going to come back, and I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but you know, the Western Athletic Conference, but and I think they're mostly a basketball conference, but that had football, right? You know, they had, I don't know what year they were. I think it was like 1921 or something like that. Maybe not quite that early, but you know, they're always pretty good, you know, I mean, they're always pretty good, but I don't know if they would have been that's what I'm not sure about, is I'm not sure who makes that decision on who's like so probably by the way they do it now, they would probably never were a power conference, but, you know, I'm not so sure that the WAC wasn't always relatively, you know, against better than the average D5 is what I'm thinking. But anyway, whether or not they were or not, all I know for sure, like I think I told you this once before, I went back and I calculated the way they played. And I'm pretty sure I did it right, but it took me a while to figure it out. But they were like 40% comparable to the rest, and the 60% is about where the Power Five. So that's, like I said, it was and that's the 2 degree, or that's the 2 to 1 separation between it. So they're about half as good, I guess, on average. Total for the WAC.
So based on the results of how many seasons, what was
51.
your sample size? 51 seasons.
Well, that's how many years they were around. Yeah.
Okay.
51 seasons.
So you're saying
the year that they.
That based on your sample size, that if the Power Five and the Group of Five, let's say they merged in regards to scheduling and they played just as many games against each other that they do against their own conferences or their own level of play, that the winning percentage should be 2 to 1 versus 1 to 2. The Power Five team should win about 67% of their games, and the Group of Five about 33.
You can even look at it now and kind of see if it works or not. It's 20%, so it'd be 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5.
I thought
G5 should only win about 1 out of 5.
I thought
that's what it is now.
Oh, I got you. That, yeah, I've run those numbers. So the Power Five wins against the Group of Five. Yes, about 80% of the time.
Yeah, 80. Yeah. They win about 1 out of every 20%. So that's like what, 2 out of every 10. Yeah, that's probably where it is. That's why the Power Five is so much better. And so if that gap ever closes, which I'm not saying it would, but if it ever does, that'll be kind of a sign of whether they're getting better or not. But yeah, they on average the G5 only wins about one out of every 5 games, 20%, so 1 out of 5. And that would have been the same for the WAC too. The WAC would have only been they probably only won about 1 out of every 5 power against the good conferences. So yeah, they were diminished in terms of, you know, performance. They were lower on the spectrum, I guess.
So
but, they were still.
So Chris, to bring this to a conclusion, I'm just trying to get some kind of a decision out of a lot of this. And this goes back to our last conversation. If you were in charge, you would have
but I can't.
All these conferences,
a lot of responsibility,
and all these teams. We'll put it on you here. All these conferences, all these teams, they would go about their scheduling the same way, and we would play out a football season. And then at the conclusion, we would put all those results into your proficiency. Well, I'll correct myself, not your proficiency ratings, but what you've.
What is my rating?
Okay. I thought you took them from somewhere else. Anyway.
I do.
Okay.
I kind of want to clear that up too, Mark, because, you know, I'm not even sure that what I do is legal because it's somebody else's assessment that I'm taking, and I'm kind of like.
We won't turn you in. So we're going to take the proficiency ratings, and that is just going to determine the national champion. We're not going to play any more games after the bowl games.
Oh, well, that's not exactly what I do, but that's pretty close. What it would be, it would have kind of narrowed it down to like I tried to explain to you, it would have narrowed it down to Georgia and Alabama for a title game. And it might sound like it's a little too convenient, right? Because that's kind of how it happened. But I mean, I'm just being honest with you. If it would have been up to me, that's what I would have done, is put Alabama and Georgia in the championship game, which is, I mean, it might sound a little, that's kind of strange because that's funny, but yeah, that's what it would have done though. So it would have put those two teams together in a title pairing, kind of like the BCS, but not exactly, because I'm not really using the BCS. I mean, I'm just kind of following the same idea. But yeah, it would have paired Alabama and Georgia in the title game. And then I guess the other teams could have gone other places, like Cincinnati. I don't know who they would have played, but maybe Ohio State, maybe, that's the other thing, is they could have, picked whoever they want. But Notre Dame maybe against, I don't know, Michigan.
So you do want
a
national championship game?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean, if it were up to me, that's probably what, I'm just saying, I don't know that I would be the one to make that decision, but probably that's what I would have, if it has to be made, the decision has to be made, then that's what the decision probably would have been, Alabama versus Georgia for the championship. That's if it has to be the decision, but I don't know that it's really my decision to make that decision. But yeah, that's what I would have done.
Well, I'll let you know this, Chris. It's not your decision. It's not my decision either. That's pretty clear right now. It's neither one of our decisions, but we still have our opinion. And I was just curious how you would set all this up. So you would have the scheduling and the conferences stand just as they are currently. Then you would have the bowl system play out, and then you would select your top two teams, and your proficiency rating system would move on to a type of BCS championship game, national championship game.
Well, it's similar to the BCS, except I'm not, it's not like I don't compare it to the BCS. The BCS is kind of its own thing. I mean, I don't even think the BCS necessarily would have done that, but I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's a little bit kind of like a spin-off of the BCS. I mean, it uses kind of the same idea, but, I don't know. It's hard for me to know what the BCS would have done because, I just don't know, but I kind of get the impression that maybe it wouldn't have been, Alabama and Georgia, but maybe it would have been too. I mean, it's like I don't really follow it close enough. I know it would have been the same. I know, for example, the playoff the past 8 years, the 4 teams that have gone to the playoff, based on what supposedly the BCS used, would have been pretty much the same 4 teams every year. As if the BCS would have. I mean, it follows a similar frame. It would have basically had the same 4 teams as the BCS would have. The only reason I know that is there's somebody's going back and taking all that information, and it's called BCS Know-How, and they're putting it online, and so it's been 8 straight years that it's been the same 4 teams, not necessarily in the same order, but same 4 top teams. BCS Know-How.
So they're doing that using the AP and the coaches poll? Because that was 2/3 of the BCS.
I don't know exactly what they're using because, like I said, I'm not really. I think it's the same idea. Whether or not it's the same, I think it gives the same result. Basically, I think it gives the same result. But whether they're using the same polls, I'm not. I know for example, I think they're substituting the Associated Press poll for the Harris poll. Is what I think they're doing, and then I'm not sure if they're using the same. They're using some of the same computer polls, and they're using basically the same formula to get the same result.
All right, Chris. Well, we're going to move on here. We appreciate the call.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a good night.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. We do have some calls stacked up, so we'll get to them right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody calling in. Appreciate everybody in the chat. And I did see the comment from somebody who said maybe this would be a more entertaining show if Mark just answered questions in the chat. So we'll make this a good phone call for sure. Welcome in. Who's up?
Well, I'll do my best and then make it a good phone call for you, Mark. Reasonable Gump. How are you doing?
Well, if I had anybody to choose to bank my one shot at a great phone call, I think I'd dial you up reasonable.
I thought you were about to pull a 180 and said it would not be you. Okay, man. I see the topic for tonight. I'm just going to take a drive-by shot at the first one. I don't know why people are surprised or either why it's even news Stetson Bennett's returning. He just won the team a national championship. Why wouldn't he return? Well, why do people not want him to return? I don't get that at all. So I don't know what people expected either. Again, he just won a national championship by destroying Michigan and soundly, some would say, destroying Alabama. So do you find that surprising at all, or am I on an island here?
I find it disturbing that Georgia fans are all up in arms. And again, this isn't every Georgia fan, of course. All fan bases have their logical fans, their delusional fans, all those things, ignorant and knowledgeable and so forth. But from what I'm hearing secondhand, but also seeing firsthand, is that Georgia fans are upset that JT Daniels decided to go into the transfer portal, and they directly relate that to Stetson Bennett, his knowledge of Stetson Bennett wanting to come back, and they're mad that Stetson Bennett is coming back because they don't believe that he is good enough. Dare I say this, 12 days after the national championship game to win the national championship, I guess. I don't know why they can't be happy with winning a national championship and actually be happy with him coming back.
Did they not watch the game? Did they not watch when they held the trophy up? Okay, obviously he is good enough because it actually happened. I'm not saying he's, Trevor Lawrence or something.
Exactly. But I posted a video and I gave him. I put him third in line of the factors that contributed to Georgia's championship. And that was just, I didn't sit here and dissect it for 45 minutes, just off the top of my head. Defense, number 1, offensive line, number 2, Stetson Bennett, number 3.
Right. It just goes to show, yes, if you have a superstar quarterback, maybe that tips the scales and you don't have to be elite everywhere else in your team. But if you flip that around and you are elite everywhere else in your team, then you don't need, a hot shot quarterback. That was conclusively proven this year. If Georgia had managed to eke out a field goal win at the last second or something and won it, then maybe I can sort of see an argument. But they didn't. They won very handily in embarrassing fashion in the last 2 minutes of the game, honestly.
Well, I thought it was a very close game.
Was trying to do with that.
But the college football playoff era has shown us that, yes, there's a decided advantage to having an elite quarterback, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, etc., Mac Jones. But Cardell Jones has won the national championship. Jake Coker's won the national championship. And now Stetson Bennett has won the national championship.
And by the way, the Jake Coker one was sort of, you can easily make an argument that was sort of in this RPO age. That wasn't that people excused the Greg McElroy championship because that was back during a time when offenses, the high-powered, specifically the up-tempo offense had not been invented yet. So they just kind of hand-waved that one. Then there's an argument of whether or not just how good or elite A.J. McCarron was. I'm of the opinion that he was a very good quarterback and could start for a lot of teams now, but I think I'm in the minority of that. But Jake Coker went up against a guy like Deshaun Watson, and he won a national title. Stetson Bennett just went up against Bryce Young and won a national title. So I don't really know what Georgia fans have to be upset about, other than the fact that their record is somewhat blemished because they're 1-1 against Alabama. I can see them being upset about that. But
I also think that there's still not a complete trust in Kirby Smart. So if this was going on at Alabama, sure, there would be some semblance of fans somewhere that would be upset and say, this guy's a walk-on 3-star. We don't want him. Let's move on. We were able to do it without, in spite of him. So but I think the reasonable faction of the Alabama fan base, and I think it would be a larger portion of them, would say, we trust Nick Saban. So yeah, this guy's coming back and he's going to have to win the job. And if he's the best quarterback in camp, he's going to win the job. So we should be fine with that. And if he's not the best quarterback, Nick Saban won't select him because he's all about winning championships.
my critique of Kirby is not that he chosen Stetson Bennett. It was the way they went about doing it and made it look shady. Because you and I had a conversation about this a month or so ago about how seeming low key, pretending one of them's injured, so that's why we're starting this guy.
Yeah.
Or how Stetson Bennett was listed as third or fourth string all spring, all summer. And then when JT Daniels does get some sort of oblique injury, they called it. Then Stetson Bennett is the next one in line. And wait a second, you said he was the third or fourth string. Why isn't Carson Beck the one next? It was all just weird how it went about. And it was, to me, the thing that rubbed me the wrong way was that I never understood why Kirby Smart didn't just come out, put his hand on Stetson Bennett's shoulder, and claim him that this guy is our starter. He's the guy I think we're going to win a championship with. I don't know why there was all this rumors, speculation. Is JT really injured? Is Stetson just beat him out in practice? For all that, like, why did it have to be like that? Why didn't he just come out and own the guy? I think he'd be getting a lot more respect, certainly now, because he was right. So that's my critique of Kirby's with the quarterback situation.
Yeah.
But
well,
anyway, let's move on to
Well, if I could make
ahead,
one
one
quick
last
point, I would just say that I don't trust enough fans' ability to watch and evaluate players that if we strip the names off the jerseys and we strip the 5-star and 3-star labels off the two and just said, watch these two dudes play, we're going to show you every pass in their collegiate careers, who's better, they would have any idea who they would select between the two. That's number one. And number two, people forget that JT Daniels started the season and put up all of one field goal against Clemson in the opener. That's the one elite defense he got to play this year, or good defense, and they put up a field goal.
Yep. And every time someone wants to bring that up, a typical Georgia guy, even a well-informed one, will just hand wave it off saying, no, that was in the beginning of the year. That's about as relevant now as 2017. I'm like, no, it's not. That was this season. That happened. The same guys playing on that team are playing right now.
Yeah,
they may have developed and gotten better since, but it's the same team. That did happen.
And this great Georgia defense that's being given all this credit of carrying Stetson Bennett at least has the support of him putting up a reasonable amount of points, whether that's 24, 30, or whatever the number, versus having to basically shut out another team and get a pick six to win a game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong. I absolutely do think, Georgia, just like you just said, the key factors that Georgia won the championship, the first one you said was the defense. If Georgia's defense hadn't have shut Alabama down, Alabama would have scored 40-something points. They probably wouldn't have given them that pick six at the end, and they probably would have won. Like, I can honestly just throw away the O-line and the Stetson Bennett factors. If the defense wasn't there, Georgia's losing that game, hands down. So I'm not saying that you can just win a championship with an average quarterback with average everything else. No, you do actually have to have elite everything else to do it with, but that's everything. If you have an elite quarterback, then you can dial it back with your defense or your offensive line if your quarterback's good and mobile. But it's an aggregate of everything that adds up to whether your team is capable of doing it. And obviously, George is capable of doing it with Stetson Bennett. There's really nothing to be mad about with that. So I wanted to go on to the playoff expansion. Now here, I'm going to ask you a question here, and this is going to tie into the point I'm going to try and make. Of course, you know me, sometimes my points just go right over the head of some people. But we're going to try here, okay? You said not a long time, you said for a lot of your life you were a big baseball guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you religiously would watch the games. Okay?
Huge.
So, huge base. Okay. So, if I were to take the Yankees,
yes,
their roster, and I'm going to match them up in, let's say, a 3-game series or a 7-game series, sure, against the Birmingham Barons, a minor league team in Alabama.
Mm-hmm. I'm aware of them.
Do the Birmingham
Jordan
Barons
played for them,
compare?
right?
Michael Jordan played for him. You're right. Do they compare at all to the roster of the Yankees?
No.
Keep in mind, again, for everyone out there, they are both professional teams, either professional athletes. They're the same type of players. Do they compare at all?
No.
No. Okay. So the point I'm making here is, again, those are both pros. I'm not taking a pro team and comparing it to a college team. Now we're going to go
comparing a major league team to a minor
here.
league team.
But they're both still pros, and this is where I'm going to get to.
Just because they're getting paid.
Do the rosters of Cincinnati compare to the roster of Alabama?
No.
Or Georgia?
Also
or
understand that we could take this to a broadcasting narrative and say whoever you believe is the best play-by-play broadcaster or anchor at the news desk or sports desk on the national scene, whomever that is, Keith Jackson back in the heyday, and then say the dude that is covering high school football in Jackson, Tennessee, and getting paid $25 a game, he's a professional. Those two guys are the same.
Yes.
That I'm just making that clear that you're making a stretch from the New York Yankees to the Birmingham Barons.
I know,
Okay.
but that actually sort of enhances the point I'm trying to make here.
All right.
So we are so desperate and up in arms that we need to validate these group of 5 champions. Like everyone wants 1 or 2 group of 5 champions in an expanded playoff. No one is trying to get that reporter you just mentioned. No one's trying to get him a job on ESPN covering the World Series. Just like no one's trying to get a minor league baseball team in the World Series. These rosters of these group of 5 teams just do not compare to the playoff caliber Power 5 teams. They compare to Vanderbilt, and that's probably an insult. They compare to Mississippi State or Purdue. They might even beat some teams like Nebraska. But that's, to me, the kind of craziness in this whole thing is this Cincinnati team. Well, what did you say? They played like the 90th something ranked schedule in the country. I don't think there are 90 Power 5 teams. Their roster and their schedule are not comparable, and is, in my opinion, not really fair to try and just like sort of squeeze them into a playoff, even in an expanded playoff, because they simply don't have the same caliber of players. They don't have the same kind of facilities. They don't have the same sort of resources, and they don't play the same kind of schedule. That's the point I'm trying to make.
True on all
accounts. Even though they're both collegiate teams. They're both collegiate teams. Alabama's a collegiate team. Cincinnati's a collegiate team. They're not professionals, but they're not comparable teams. That's what I'm saying.
So you do not want to see any group of 5 teams in any type of playoff format. You didn't want to see Cincinnati in this playoff.
No, I didn't. I've been a long-time advocate that group of 5 teams should have their own playoff.
See, I don't want to misrepresent myself. I'm okay with that because I do think that there's a clear distinction between the 2 levels of play. It's clear, as one of the previous callers pointed out, and I've run the numbers. It's about 80 or 85% of the games between the 2 levels are won by the Power 5 teams, and there's
if you're the Pac-12.
Well, yeah, you got to throw the Pac. It goes up tremendously if you throw out the Pac. They went 7-6 against a group of 5.
I watched your video and I was laughing.
Oh my word. It's embarrassing how bad they are. So the Pac-12, my goodness. I can't wait to run the numbers on the American Conference in the Mountain West because I think they might be better. So I am just, see, I don't have like one system and I'm sold on that. And I say that no other system can work and we've got to go 16 teams or 8 teams and it has to be done this way. I just want some decisions to be made. And I do think that I want the field to be expanded. Number 1. Number 2, I want all the conferences, meaning the Power 5, to be represented. And number 3, I want to see the top teams in the country that do not win conference championships to be included. I think there is some charm to a 16-team field that includes all 10 conference champions. And if you were listening at the time, as I stated to that caller, no, those are not the 16 best teams in the country. Clearly, they're the 11 best teams in the country because that's the Power 5 champions and the 6 wild cards that we're going to take. That are going to be the likes of Texas A&M and Michigan and whoever. So they're going to be the 11 best teams in the country. And then after that, it's going to really spread out. You're going to have like the 28th best team in the country and the 45th best team in the country and the 65th best team in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay with that because if you can't make the top 11 out of the Power 5, now that it's been stretched from 4 to 11, really 16, but 11 in a practical sense for you, then you don't belong anyway. And I would love to give those little guys a shot. Maybe if we've got too many broken bones and too many 66-10 games after 3 or 4 years, I'll change my mind. But I wouldn't mind seeing that for the excitement of whether it would take 2 years or 5 or 10 years for us to be sitting here in the fourth quarter of a Clemson Western Kentucky game and it's 24-all in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not going to sit here and complain and light the house on fire or something like that were to happen.
But to be
That's
clear,
just the point that I think a lot of people are missing when they're saying that a 13-0 Cincinnati, being barely squeezing in the 4th spot, and let's all be real with each other. A lot of things had to happen even for that to occur.
mm-hmm.
I mean, this season. And a lot of people are mad about that, especially for the first rankings. They were number 6. They're like one of the few undefeated teams left at that time. And that's just the reality of the situation. No, it's not Cincinnati's fault that they play a terrible schedule and that they're in a conference that is not respected and not talented. But that's also just reality. I don't think we should be just handing out, like you said, giving the little guy a chance when they just don't go through the same rigor that bigger schools and more in a stronger conferences. I think it's more fair, in my opinion, to split the playoffs like that.
Now, some people give Cincinnati, including myself to a certain extent, give them credit for scheduling Indiana, who was supposed to be good, who turned out to be the worst team in the Big Ten. But anyway, they scheduled Indiana and they scheduled Notre Dame. So from a scheduling standpoint, at least on the surface to begin the season, it bulked up their schedule to some level. But let's not give Cincinnati as a football program and administration credit for scheduling those games with some kind of foresight. People talk to people that think
7 years ago.
Yes, that make it sound like they went out and grabbed Notre Dame because they were going to make their run for the playoff and prove to everyone they can beat. No, the game was scheduled like in 2013. Cincinnati had no thoughts of making a playoff. They wanted to go to Notre Dame and make money and be on national TV.
I also kind of need to bang the gong on this. We need to give them credit for scheduling those teams argument. Like, yeah, okay, but that's still just 2.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Not Alabama. Power 5 teams like Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia, we play 9 or 10 Power 5. Not all. I mean, well, Indiana would be worse than basically every team on Alabama or Ohio State schedule, but Notre Dame, that would have been Alabama's 3rd best opponent if you include the SEC championship. Probably the same for Ohio State. So, and that's just 2 games. Like, I get it. I'm glad that you did it, but if we want to be objective here, if I don't want to give points for effort, do you understand? Like, I'm only just going to I'm going to write everyone's names. I'm going to sit the schedules down side by side. This team over here, this nameless team, that their best 2 games were Notre Dame and Indiana, or sorry, not the best 2, their toughest games were Notre Dame and Indiana, and I guess Houston for the 3rd one. It's not even remotely comparable to basically every other schedule in the top 10.
No, that's why it's 90th in the country.
Right.
And,
So
and, and while this was all playing
it sounds
out,
like people just want to give them points just because those are the only two teams, like Power 5 teams. Not Power 5. Notre Dame's not Power 5. They're nothing technically. They're independent. But those are the two teams they went out and scheduled. But that's just 2 out of 12.
Yeah.
But people want to blow it up to be like, well, they went out and scheduled Notre Dame. They played just as tough a schedule as Alabama did. No, they didn't. So that's just the point I got to bang the gong on a little bit.
Well, I'll split the argument to the other side's defense. They're looking for that game that's going to prove that a Cincinnati can show up and represent themselves. So they think going to Notre Dame and winning that game that they showed when they're at their best, what we expect must have been their best or near their best, that they can beat a team of Notre Dame's caliber on the road. So they did that. They showed that their ceiling is pretty good. It's maybe not playoff good, but it's top 10 good. But to your point, and I take calls all the time, and a zillion Cincinnati backers brought up Notre Dame and Indiana, hit me over the head with it a zillion times. And I said, well, if you're talking about, again, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, whoever you want to talk about that was also being discussed in the playoff, and we're talking resumes, if they had an Indiana on their schedule, we're not placing that game as a resume
it detracts
builder
from it, honestly.
Yes, it detracts
if
from
anything,
it.
In Indiana, it detracts from it.
Yes. So,
well, and honestly, the whole thing about how they can show up any given Saturday and get it done. I mean, it's like you guys are arguing that. I'm like, I'm not sure why you're arguing that. No one's disputing that. See, everyone knows that UCF team could have shown up and done something magical on one Saturday. Some would argue that they did do it against Auburn. Everyone, those Boise State teams of the past, sure, they were capable. They actually, I'm pretty sure Boise State went to Atlanta or the Georgia Dome and beat Georgia right there.
Yeah,
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So yes, of course they can do it. Well, that's never been anyone's problem. Everyone's problem is that they didn't have to do it on a week-to-week basis, and that's just reality. One quick thing, Mark. I know I don't like holding you up here. I just want to ask you something. Have you ever thought about, so on some of these call-in shows like Paul Feinbaum and stuff, they have like a second phone line calling for like regular callers or special guests or something. Have you ever thought of having like a second phone line for like Patreon members so they could like sort of jump the chain, sort of like a flash pass at Disney World or something?
That's an idea. I have not.
Right. Okay. I just want because I've been a Patreon member ever since you went solo and got away from ESPN. And I don't do it because I want special content. I almost never even go on the Patreon. I just do it because I want to support you and everything.
I appreciate that.
And I'm still not going anywhere. But I'm just saying it would be nice because your show has gotten a lot bigger and there's usually over 100 people on your call-in show that's watching. It would be really nice as a Patreon member if I could come on and not kind of like wonder if I'm going to be able to call in or not. Because your show's a lot more popular now. So that's just an idea.
Well, that's a great idea, and I'll tell you a few things just to give you a little background information. So, number one, I don't control the call-in system in that somebody was kind enough to set this up for me in regards to just giving me access to it. So I would need to talk to them to find out what the logistics are of if there's a capability there to put certain numbers in to speed them to the head of the line as you suggest. But I'll look into that to see if that's possible. Number one. Number two, it is difficult because I only see the person I'm talking to, and then I see 2 lines in queue. So I may have 2 people waiting. I could have 100 people waiting, and I have no idea. I just know I've got 2 people waiting, and I basically always have 2 people waiting. So it could be 2, it could be 12, it could be 50. I don't know. So I feel bad for anybody if I've got like 40 people waiting and I just don't know.
I guess I was actually thinking more along the lines of there would be a different number for Patreon members to call. So not the one that we're talking on now. So it would ring sort of on a different phone and you can see it.
Gotcha.
And then when you're done with this call, then you would answer that one instead because it's Patreon guy or something.
See, I actually.
But anyway, yeah, that should.
So I'm going to jot that down and look into it. But that's a good perk. That's.
But anyway, man,
reasonable.
hope to get to talk to you soon. I got another topic that would take a whole phone call that I got to get into.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it tonight.
Sounds like I said something wrong.
Have a good night.
All right, Reasonable Gump. I appreciate it.
No, it wasn't you. It was another caller.
Okay. We'll see ya.
All right. Bye.
That, in fact, is an excellent idea, and I will find that out. If we could possibly set up a separate phone line as a Disney Fast Pass of sorts for the Patreon people, which that reminds me, I'll take the next call in just a second. So down at the bottom, you see that we are doing a very small thing here, but I thought of it today as I was setting up for the show, and I typed out a ton of names on the ticker, and there can only be so much space given. So if you don't see your name on the bottom of the ticker, I was just basically going through a few different shows to see who comments a lot, who contributes, all those things. This is not a list of who financially contributed. This is not a list of anything in particular. It's just giving some credit, some acknowledgement, recognition to certain people. And I made up 3 or 4 of these lists. They're only so long. I can only fit in like 200 characters. So I don't want anyone to be offended if you don't see your name on the ticker down below. I will get to you at some point. I'll make this a regular part of the show at times to recognize certain people, and you may like to see that. You may not care. I just wanted to recognize some folks that contribute on a regular basis. Again, it's not a financial thing by any stretch. It's just contribute in any way that are here on a fairly regular basis. And I made up about 4 of these tickers. So there's about 20 names, I would guess, on each one. And there's a ton more of you that deserve to be recognized, believe me, beyond what I was able to type on the ticker. So we will get to you. And I need to do a better job, admittedly, at I hope you know how much I appreciate everyone being here and your support that comes in different ways, financially, through likes, through mentions on Twitter and Facebook, contributing in the chat, calling, all the things that you do. And so I appreciate it in any way that you are able to contribute, and just spread the word that we're here talking college football every day with you. And when I say every day, I understand I'm not doing a call-in show every day here, but I got 25 team channels, and we are somewhere every day, all the time, producing content and doing live streams. I've got a live stream tonight. I can't lose track of time. Got about 45 minutes at 8 p.m. Eastern time, our Miami live stream on the Miami channel tonight as well. All right, let's get to our next caller here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's George. How you doing?
George, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Who was that last caller? He had some good ideas.
Reasonable Gump.
Reasonable Gump.
I didn't know
Have
that
a
he was
good day, Reasonable Gump.
Reasonable Gump. He's been here for a long time. Not as long as you, but a long time.
I was willing to wait. He said he had another subject to discuss. I was like, I'll wait.
That's all right.
But he hung up. Anyways, I like this idea about the phone thing, but it should be a Florida Gator phone behind you, and I'm the only one that has the number.
Yeah, we would have to have 3 tiers, George. We would have the regular line, we'd have the Patreon line, then we'd have the George Bat phone, Gator phone line.
Exactly. Yes. And just to get this off my chest, I was in the chat the other night and I was talking, and I said, I'm happy for any old person from Georgia that knew they were never going to see another national champion. I'm happy for them. And some guy said, I'm 67 years old. I knew I was going to die before I saw it. So for those people, I'm happy. You know, even if it was with Stetson Bennett and there's all that controversy, I'm still happy for him.
The one thing you can take from this, George, is that even though you had to endure Georgia winning a national championship, you can take delight in knowing that there's a ton of Georgia fans out there that are not happy about their national championship. It's only like 8 days later, 9 days later, and they're already upset and paranoid about their quarterback situation next year.
I actually understand. I mean, do you remember the Justin Fields fiasco? And then you import some 5-star called JT. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. There's a problem in Athens. I don't know what's going on down there. That's weird. Hey, is this a good stat line? Stetson Bennett was 17 of 26 for 224 yards. Is that a good stat line?
It's reasonable. It's good. I would like to know the touchdowns and interceptions that go along with that. That's huge.
I don't know about the interceptions. I don't have that. But it was an 8.6 yard average.
That's
and
good.
2 TDs and 71 quarterback rating.
That was in the national championship game, correct?
Correct.
I thought Stetson Bennett played
71 a good quarterback?
No, it's not.
Is a 71 a good rating?
Well, is that a QBR rating or is that a passer rating? They're two different things.
That's QBR.
Yeah. See, I don't know. I believe in the QBR rating being superior to the passer rating, but I don't know what a good one is or a poor one. So, for example, if anybody cares about this, I'm still going to explain it because I find this kind of fascinating, and I'm a nerd this way. The difference is a passer rating just takes every stat just the way it is. Meaning, if you throw a 2-yard completion, it doesn't matter what the situation is. It evaluates that the same all the time. 2-yard completion. Well, as you well know, if it's 3rd and 10, a 2-yard completion is meaningless. It's a failure. But if it's a 2-yard completion at the 2-yard line for a touchdown to win the national championship game, well, then that 2-yard completion is a success. But the passer rating only measures 2-yard completion. The QBR puts it into a game situation as to whether that was a successful play or not. And so I think it's much more valid, but I don't know if a 71, how good that is. I hope it's based on 1 to 100. And then it would be what? It would be a good rating, but not great.
I think some quarterbacks have ratings of like 120 or 110.
Well, that's a passer rating.
know,
Again, that taps out at 158. That's why that's confusing too. People can't wrap their minds around 158. The other thing that makes no sense about the traditional passer rating, let's say if you went like 25 for 31 for 282 yards and 3 touchdowns and no picks, you might have a perfect passer rating. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You threw incompletions, you could do better than that. Like there are tons of perfect passer ratings, but it doesn't make sense because they weren't perfect. So
yeah, I guess we're going to have to give Stetson his due. I know nobody likes the guy. He looks weird. He's blinking. Georgia fans are even disappointed. But in the chat just now, somebody just said Stetson Bennett's QBR is 86.7 and Bryce Young's is 87.6. So they're separated by 1 point. And that's probably true, really.
Okay. My assumption is correct. The QBR ranges from 0 to 100, so 50 is average. So they got that right, that they can make it understandable to people. So that's good. So 71 would be 71. It's a 7 out of 10. It's good. It's not great.
I cannot imagine Stetson Bennett walking on that field as the starter versus Oregon. I believe Georgia's fans, their heads will explode if that happens. There will be a mess to clean up in Georgia. They better fucking start one of those 5 stars, man. I don't know what it is about Stetson, man. He's got his national title ring. He's fulfilled his childhood dream. I think he's going to be the quarterback coach now on the field kind of guy. I think he's loyal to the university, and I just can't see it. Everybody wants to see a Baker Mayfield out there, or a Joe Burrow, or even some dumbass like Tebow who won't quit talking about God and stuff. But just not Stetson.
Oh, come on. We like Timmy T. Were you a Tim
tell him
Tebow
to quit
fan? He
blinking.
won national championship there. Or did you
He's
like?
not my favorite quarterback. I didn't like the sideshow that went with it. It's still going on. He still won't quit.
Most of it's not
Like
his
it
fault.
was just automatic.
He doesn't create
Yeah,
most
the
of
media.
that.
Hey, listen, Stetson screwed up because Pittsburgh's going to need a new quarterback. He could have took Roethlisberger's place.
Well, yeah.
That's just a little insight for me. And I'm glad we didn't start the gnome business, seeing as how nobody was going to buy one anyway, apparently. I thought maybe, but I didn't see this reaction coming.
George, they might have sold even better because people would have gotten them. Then they would have like made videos of them like smashing it.
Put them in the middle of their fire pit and burn it.
Yeah.
Hey, how about this? Do you think a $500 million payout from Michigan to the sex abuse victims is going to set them back at all?
I saw that.
Do they have an extra $490 million laying around, or what?
I hear that Michigan's pretty wealthy, but man, that's a chunk of change.
How much did the kids from Penn State get? Did they get a $500 million? What happened there?
That's a good question. That was 10 years ago. Inflation, there is an inflation problem in this country, George, if you were aware. I don't know what they got.
Right.
I always find it interesting of how they arrive at these numbers too. 490 million.
I know. Plus, they can appeal that for the next 75 years. Everyone will be dead by the time the judge finally says, forget this. Throw this whole case out. That's how law works. Or you can get a judgment you can never cash. All right. I figured out what Stetson keeps blinking. He's blinking. I used to be George's gnome, but now I belong to Kirby Smart. That took a while. I had to slow it down. And
to answer your question, George, I just looked it up. Penn State has paid $118 million to Jerry Sandusky victims.
Wow. So whatever Michigan had going on up there, maybe that's adjusted for inflation. Maybe that's the same as whatever 118 million was 10 years ago. All right. I'm not going to get into the media, social media, the news, the radio. I agree with your opening assessment about the insanity of it all. It reminds me of when I was in prison for the first time. I couldn't believe nobody would ever shut up. It was this roar of noise 24/7. You could actually hear individualized conversations, and it was all insanity and stupidity and talking about drugs and what I did. And now that's the real world. It's like being in prison. You can't get away from it.
Dare I ask, the first time you were in prison?
Yes.
As opposed
that
to
was the only time
Okay.
Yeah, I was innocent, but I can see how I ended up there because I was in a car with two guys that did armed robberies. But the second time was just total political bullshit.
All right, George. Good to hear from you, my man.
Hi, exploring with Ben. Hi, Coconut King, Uncle Rico Katusa, Louis Tapp, Prince Bowie, Muhammad. There's a lot of people on here. Cheryl, good old Cheryl. All right, I'm not going back any further. Sacred Grove. Sacred Grove wants to know how I just Tebow. Same way Georgia fans are tired of Stetson. I'm like, can we please have another quarterback to talk about? I mean, it's been like 20 years, right? I thought Kyle Trask was going to take his place for a minute there.
All right, George. We're going to move on.
All right.
Thanks for the call, man.
Go Gators. See y'all later. You too, man. Bye.
It's our guy, George. George, of course, on the bottom ticker at some point. And if you didn't notice, Spaghetti Factory, I do appreciate your super chat contribution, who is saying you should put the real Hayden on there. And I believe he meant on the ticker below. So Spaghetti Factory, I hope you saw that I gave the real Hayden his own banner for like 30 seconds. That would have cost him like $1,000 of sponsorship time. Probably a lot more than 30 seconds. It was up there for a while. So Spaghetti Factory, appreciate that so much. So you purchased his banner for him. All right. And before we take our next call, let me get to this other super chat coming in from Star Trek Elysium. All right. I need my glasses here. Mark, have a super chat show with no callers and only take super chats. Make these callers give some money. Well, all right. I will address this very briefly. We are going to have a live stream here at some point soon during the off season in which we just talk about the show. And I'm not going to say anything about college football. I'm not going to address any questions or comments about college football. It's only going to be for people that care about and have ideas and want to listen about the channel, the Voice of College Football, all the channels, this channel, everything we're doing, everything involved. But that's an interesting concept. But I would love to get to a point. This is the point we need to get to where the super chats and the actual the ad revenue on YouTube. The ad revenue on YouTube, believe it or not, is paying me. That's basically 98% of my income right now is YouTube ad revenue. People that really make it on YouTube, that should become like a cherry on top, icing on the cake revenue stream. It should be more about subscriptions and sponsorships and all these other things. Market, affiliate marketing, all those things should comprise the majority of the revenue, and the ad revenue from YouTube and the super chats, that should just be added. So I know most of you are saying, shut up, Mark, start talking about college football. But so I appreciate that, Star Trek The Asylum. Thank you so much for your contribution. And so let me see if I take your advice, do a show, no callers, only take super chats. So I'm going to sit here silent until I see a super chat. Got it. Maybe I'll try that sometime. And that will just appear so bizarre to everyone. We'll see if anybody catches on. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Willie.
Willie. What's
Good
going
to
on?
hear you again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely not going to take any legal advice from George to start with.
That's why I said when he said, well, the first time I was in prison, I'm like, the first time.
But he was innocent.
Oh, George.
But I don't know why these guys are trashing that Stetson Bennett. I mean, here's a guy that raised his game in the biggest stage of the season and played a great game. Played two great games. He looked like Otto Graham in the first half of the Michigan game. That guy played good. I was surprised myself how good he played. But the people in the SEC, they're the ones that don't want the expanded playoffs. They hate a quarterback that just won the national championship. I mean, I'm confused by this whole situation. Why can't we just get 16 teams? Have these people not heard of the basketball tournament, how popular it is, March Madness? One team, Stephon Curry's team, upset somebody. They're going to only win one game, or maybe they're only going to win two. But that one game they won, they beat one of the best teams. And I'm not saying if you got 16 teams, there could be an upset. I don't like this idea of these guys talking how good these rosters are, because I watched Ohio State have 5- and 4-star players play like 2- and 3-star players all year. I mean, these star ratings are, I don't know, I think they're overblown myself. as far as the play on the field. I mean, I was just confused by it, and now I'm more confused by the guy comparing the Birmingham Bulls to the New York Yankees. I'm still trying to figure that one out. I mean, I'm just confused by some of these callers today. I mean, this last guy must really have a case for Stetson Bennett down there in Georgia. The guy played his ass off in those games, man. I mean, he won a national championship. I mean, that Slovis, he couldn't get out of his way against Clemson the first game. I mean, no matter what, the people in the SEC are never satisfied. You can never satisfy those guys down there. They don't like elections. They don't like anything unless it's all about them. They only want to have. I'm surprised they just have they don't want to just have anybody in the field of four but SEC teams if they could figure out a way to do it. They need to go to 16 teams. That would be a good playoff. That would be enjoyable. The whole country could watch it. That's just how I feel about it.
Are you going to let me select the 16?
Well, you could do as good a job as anybody. I say the conference, the top five conferences all get in.
Yep.
And the rest are wild cards. You could figure out a formula better than having 13 guys sit in a room smoking cigars, knowing where they went to college, and we'll put these teams in. Maybe we'll get some bonus money for our school that way. I just want to see a system where there's more teams than four. I just don't like four teams. There's not an NCAA playoff that comes close to having four teams. It's really crazy. I mean, the SEC loves it because they keep getting all the recruits. It's good for Ohio State. We're getting a lot of recruits because we're one of the teams that gets in there. But what about I want something that's fair for the whole country. I mean, I just don't believe these guys that say, well, their roster's not good enough. Cincinnati had a weak schedule, but they did beat some ranked teams. I mean, I'm sure they probably couldn't have won the Big Ten. I'm sure they couldn't have come close to winning the SEC. But they were who they were. They won all their games. So I didn't see anything wrong with them in there. Alabama got the number one seed and went double overtime in their last game against Auburn. Okay. They had how many close games did Alabama have this year that they could have lost? 4 or 5 anyway. Yep. And they did lose to an unranked. Was A&M ranked at the end of the year?
I think it depends. I had them ranked, but I don't know if they were ranked.
Yeah, they probably were in the 20s. Well,
they were 8 and 4.
I just think they just need to have. I mean, they need to open it up and make it 16 teams. That'd even out the recruiting level. Well, the Pac-12 is going to be better with Lincoln Riley out there, so you can count a good champion coming out of there probably. But like you said, they open up 16 teams. It'll help the Big Ten because we'll be getting 2 or 3 teams in.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten would benefit more than any other conference.
Now, there's the one idea of the guy calling and having people skip people in line. I don't think that would be too good for your show, myself, because I don't like the idea of getting skipped in line after I've been waiting. I mean, you want to get as many callers and people watching your show and saying they like your show, correct?
True.
That benefits your show more than someone paying you money to be in the group and get your football picks.
Well, I think that's a deeper conversation, but yeah, just one way in which all this works for somebody that takes on something like this for me is to have a group, whether that's right now about 60 people on Patreon. We hope it's going to be like 6,000 people someday. And then I supply them with extra content, whether that's predictions or extra videos or whatever it is. And although many of them have told me they don't want anything extra because I do enough here, that they just want to contribute. But I do need to provide them with some kind of benefits to being there.
Well, you could provide them benefits other than skip other people in line, I would think. I mean, I would. How do you become a Patreon member?
You sign up on Patreon. It's $5 a month.
What? How do you spell? What? How do you spell it?
Patreon is Patreon. Patreon. And you just
Patreon.
Patreon. I'll put it on the screen.
Okay.
And then you just
Okay.
put Mark Rogers TV in the search bar. You're going to find my page, and you can sign up for it right there. And it's $5 a month.
Will probably become a Patreon member, but I would be a Patreon member that would be against myself skipping somebody in line.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, maybe that's just how I feel about that. I mean, I got no problem giving you $5 a month. I try to send you money and they keep sending it back to me.
Well, I appreciate that, Willie. I don't know what the problem is there, but you go to PayPal, right?
Well, when I get off here tonight, I'm going to try to find this Patreon thing and sign up, because I really like your show, and I've got a couple other people who turned them on to it, and they like it too. Because you do get some wacky callers on here. But as far as Stetson Bennett goes, I mean, give the guy a break. I don't know. I'm just confused by that whole situation. I mean, you win the national championship as a quarterback, and they were calling for your head. I mean, I don't understand it. Plus, the guy played great in both those games. Willie, he outplayed Bryce Young, and it wasn't too hard to outplay Michigan's quarterbacks, but I mean, he did play two great games. So he's a walk-on. So he's a 3-star. He played like a 6-star in those two games.
Yeah. Well, once they hit campus and start practicing, it shouldn't matter what star they are. That's over. That's an evaluation from high school. That's over. That's just like when you show up from work. If you get a job and you've got some great resume and that got you, and you had an interview, and so your interview and your resume, that got you the job. Well, once you start working there, that doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what you did somewhere else. It only matters what you do there. That's the way it should be.
That's exactly right. I wish a lot of your callers, that's what they talk about. Well, our rosters are so strong. We play such a strong schedule. These other teams don't deserve to even be in the playoffs and all this. If they just get 16 teams or 5 winners, and that still leaves, 5 out of 16, that still leaves 11 slots for other teams. They definitely got to do something about this 4-team playoff. I don't like to see teams play a month ago and then play again for the national championship, and one win one time and one win the other. Like your one Alabama caller that said that he's calling it a co-championship no matter what. He's not accepting the results of the championship game.
Yeah.
So that would eliminate that. That might not eliminate it, but I'd say there's a good possibility that they eliminate it. I mean, I just don't think they should stay with 4 teams. I don't know. ESPN probably, the money behind it of getting more money from the playoff games will probably drive them to get more teams. Why the ACC's against it's beyond me, but I don't know. What's your thinking on that? Why would they be against the increased playoff?
Well, I got to say this. This past season, Pitt probably would have made the field of 16. So they would have had Pitt, who was obviously they would have made it. They won the conference championship, but they didn't have a team in the top 16 after Pitt going into the postseason. And if you look past the first 2 playoff years of 2014 and 15, where Florida State and Clemson would have made it, they would have only had one team. I've run through the 16-team playoff, going through the rankings of all the playoff years, and the ACC would have never had anyone but Clemson in the playoff. They would have never had a second team in the playoff. They've been that bad.
Well, the one thing I'll say, that's a perfect example of what I mean. You put Pitt in at 16, and if that Pickett's hot and they're playing Alabama, and Alabama barely beat some of these other teams, I could see Pittsburgh beating them if Pickett was hot. And Rice, and they throw a couple turnovers. I could see that easily happening. I mean, you get a lower ranked team that's got a hot quarterback like that, and the other team makes a couple key turnovers, which Alabama was prone to this year. They couldn't run the ball, and they were, by the end of the season, having that terrible injury to Jamison Williams. That just made me cry. I mean, even though he left Ohio State, I was still rooting for him all the way. I didn't want him to get drafted ahead of Olave or Wilson, but I still was rooting for the guy. And then one thing on my last comment I'm going to say, the one guy that tried to compare Baker Mayfield and Joe Burrow better take another look at what's going on in the NFL.
Well,
because
yeah.
when Baker Mayfield won the Heisman Trophy, his three receivers were Andrews with the Ravens, Hollywood Brown with the Ravens, and C.D. Lamb with the Cowboys. So that's how he won the Heisman Trophy. Joe Burrow, well, he had some good receivers too, but Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield aren't in the same class. I mean, look at what Joe Burrow's doing right now. He's already one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah,
So
he is.
I'll just leave it at that. I mean, I don't know what Ohio State was thinking not letting him play. I mean, Haskins had a hell of an arm and could drop a dime on a 50-yard pass, but Joe Burrow, he's just, I don't know. He's a hell of a leader. Besides, he's probably one of the most accurate quarterbacks ever to play. His 2019 season was probably one of the best quarterback ever had. I can't really think of another quarterback that had as good a season as he did. Can you?
No, I would rank that as the best quarterback season off the top of my head. 60 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Yeah, threw about 75% completion percentage. And they played one of the toughest schedules we've seen in recent college football.
What were they down in Texas right at the start of the year, like 2 or 3 touchdowns in that game, and just blew right back. I mean, that guy's a leader. I don't care. I like Joe Burrow. I love Joe Burrow, what he's doing for the Bengals. He took his playoff money and donated it to the food bank in Athens, one of the poorest cities in Ohio. I mean, he's a hell of a man. And I'm just going to let you go on that comment, Mark. And I'm going to go to Patreon and try to get on there.
Thank you, Willie.
I'll do that as soon as I get off here.
I appreciate it.
And when's your next Ohio State show, or when's your next big call in?
Well, the next Ohio State show is next Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern. Ohio State show.
Yeah, I listen to those. You can't call in on those, can you?
No. But in terms of our call-in, now that we're in the off season, I do need to figure out a schedule. I know that you guys would do much better if you knew that I was going to be on, let's say, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday or something like that. But I just having trouble figuring out when that would be.
Well, I'm 73 and retired and sit here in front of 3 50-inch TVs watching YouTube and sports. So I look on the YouTube looking for you all the time so I can find you. That's how I found your show tonight. I didn't even know it was on. But I'm glad I did, because I love talking to you, Mark. You're a great man. And I'm going to get on that Patreon tonight if it kills me. So just keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks you, Willie.
Thanks a lot for taking my call.
Absolutely. Good to hear from you, man. Have a good one.
Uh-huh.
It's our guy, Willie, Buckeye fan. Always has some knowledgeable takes on college football. Yeah, real quick before I take these 2 calls, and hopefully nobody else is on here because it's about 7:43 Eastern. I've got to be on the Miami stream at 8 o'clock. So Miami football fans, everybody else, head on over Miami channel, 8 o'clock Eastern time. But I do want to say about this Joe Burrow season in 2019, the schedule that they took on, think about this. 2019, LSU beat, when it was all said and done, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama, Texas A&M, Auburn, Texas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, which they weren't anything great that year in particular. And who did they play in the other division? Florida. Really good Florida team that they beat in a pretty good game with Kyle Trask and Joe Burrow going back and forth. 42-28, I believe, was the final in that one. So it was a rugged schedule. And this was not Auburn, Brian Harsin, 6-7 this past year. They were really good that year as well. And that was actually by score LSU's closest game, 23-20. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Well, this is Jeremiah.
Jeremiah.
I'm your, yeah.
How you doing?
I wanted to talk to you about the playoff, and you're talking about how you would choose the teams. So if I was going to do a 12 team playoff, I would think you would need to do the buys, right? You need to determine who would get the buys. I don't think they're going to go for a 16 team. I don't think that the schools want to play that many games to determine that. And so the question would be, how do you pick those 4 buys? And people say the top 4 conferences, but I would say just the top 4 conference team representatives. So let's say the SEC had a team and they won their conference, they would get one of those buy spots, and then the next conference who had a top team, and they would receive the next slot, and so on and so forth. And it wouldn't necessarily be the Power 5 or the G5, but in case, let's say, the AAC was better than the ACC and the Pac-12.
Okay, Jeremiah.
If they had a higher representative.
I apologize interrupting here, but I just am trying to get a clarification from you. When you say take the 4 best conference champions, and if this conference is better than that conference and that team's better than, based on what? What are we basing this on? Who's making this decision? What is it based on?
Well, there would be a committee that would rank the teams now, because that's excluding, let's say, if we did conference.
We already have that.
Matching,
so you're good with a committee right now. They're going to continue to
committee if they don't.
They're going to continue to rule college football.
I would like it. Well, yeah. Well, in a perfect world, I would like to have even scheduling, but we need to rip apart the conferences, and you would need to you would have to make leagues, and you would need to configure those conferences in a certain way to where each conference necessarily would have regional divisions, so that if some region in the United States was more had a larger recruiting base like the South is right now in this era of college football, Georgia, Florida, Texas, and the South has an advantage over the North and the West right now. You would need to change that, but I have a whole different setup for that if you want to hear about it. But right now, we need a conference. You would need a committee for the moment. Maybe in a decade or so, after they get the playoff sorted, you can change the way scheduling works.
Why do we have to wait a decade to change scheduling?
Well, because even if they just change the non-conference schedule, the in-conference slate is still going to be it's going to lean toward one conference or another.
Sure.
For example, the Big Ten could just be the hardest conference, or it could be the easiest conference.
Yeah.
But if they play a super hard non-conference slate, it's kind of like Cincinnati playing a weak conference schedule, but they played Notre Dame.
If we get,
you get what I mean. That's why I think you need.
If we get too wrapped up in trying to make these conferences even and equal, then they're going to have to be changed like every 5 or 6 years. You're going to have to keep moving teams back and forth. So we're talking fantasy world right now. You've moved us into when you talk about completely realigning the sport and all that, this is not a professional league. I know that the players are starting to get paid, but it's not tied to a professional league that can do whatever it wants. We're talking about institutions that were founded there academically before anything else. And so there's a lot that goes into moving conferences and changing this and that, that goes beyond football. So we're starting to get into a fantasy world, talking about realignment and talking about things that aren't going to happen. And not that I'm saying there's not going to be more realignment, because there is, but I'm talking about realignment to the point where you blow the whole thing up and say, let's make these divisions. And then we're just talking about, we're not dealing with reality.
Not in the current. I agree with that, but I don't know exactly how you would solve that with just a non-conference slate, and how you would match that with the conference competitiveness. Are you gonna, let's say the SEC was the best conference, are they going to play teams that are on the lower end of the Power 5? Or are they going to play as tough competition as, let's say, the Big 12? And they're just mid-tier competition in their conference. And you were going to get rid of the committee as a whole.
I don't want the committee. I don't want a committee choosing playoff teams. That wouldn't be part of my system.
Yeah, but I would like to see how you would fix the scheduling if you're going to do it with only the three non-conference games. It depends on the conference, the 3 or 4 non-conference games, and how you would make the schedules even. I would be curious.
Okay. Yeah. So I've addressed this in the past and posted videos. And I will do another series here in the off season, because I understand that people haven't seen those videos, and we're getting new subscribers here all the time, which I'm appreciative of. So we will address this at a later date in terms of how I would do scheduling. But just to review it very quickly, is out of conference scheduling I would address in giving everyone a 500 composite non-conference schedule. So let's understand that there's no way possible to make out of conference schedule or in conference scheduling, unless you're going to play every team in your conference. There's no way to make out of conference schedule equitable, because you can't see the future. So when you make them the schedules in the off season, you don't know who's going to be better than you expected or not as good as last year. You don't know that. You can only deal with what happened the previous season. So I would base my schedule formula on the previous season's results, and I would build everyone a 500 composite schedule, meaning their opponents, non-conference, would total a 500 record in the previous season, because that's the only way to make it as equitable as possible.
Okay. I could see that being interesting.
So we've only got about 6 or 7 minutes here, Jeremiah. I appreciate the call. I'm going to move on to our final call. So thanks so much for calling. And of course, you're welcome back anytime.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Last up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's JMatt217, man. Good to hear from you. I haven't talked to you since before the playoff.
How's it going, man?
Good, man. Good. Hope you had a good New Year. And,
I did.
I'll be quick. I know you got. I know you got that Miami podcast coming up, so I'll be quick for you, obviously. So first of all, the whole thing with Stetson Bennett. I don't know why people are getting so upset with it, because if you look at everything that he's done as an athlete, and I myself being a Buckeyes fan with my podcast, Scarlet Rage, I told you about my other 2 contributors that I got that are Alabama and a Clemson fan. and we're still getting off the ground on our podcast. But it's not just the fact that he's coming back for another season. It's the fact that he's not ready for the NFL. He's got great game management, but now he needs to see what it's like to manage the game. When you lose stars that you've relied on, and now you've got to take a look and see what the team looks like when you are being more of a game manager. You look at greats like, Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Troy Aikman, you see that they were great game managers, and they had maybe one or two stars around them. But when you got 4 or 5 different stars around you, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to be successful. So I think, honestly, Georgia fans should, number one, take this as an opportunity that, this guy who just won you the national championship could get better. And not only that, but he's doing it so that he can be a better game manager, a better athlete for the next level. Because really, if you look at his gameplay throughout the year, he's not quite ready for the NFL. There's decisions, things, and game management that he lacks with. So don't be upset that you have a quarterback that says, I love you, university, I'm willing to come back. Because the example that I also pull up is Cardale Jones, first ever quarterback to win the national championship in college football playoff era, taking over for J.T. Barrett. He could have gone to the NFL, but he came back for more game management. Obviously, that's a whole other conversation, but he came back for more game management. He came back because he loved the university. And he came back because he felt like he wasn't ready. And so I think Georgia fans just need to take a look at this and say, look, you just have a national championship quarterback who's coming back and saying, I think I can get better. So you'd be nuts to think that you shouldn't be excited that your national championship quarterback is coming back and saying, I think I can get even better. So that's a positive note. Don't get angry about him. Don't get angry about these 5 stars because, we've seen Saban, we've seen Urban Meyer, we've seen Kirby Smart, we've seen Dabo Swinney recruit guys who are 3 and 4 stars and turn them into 5 stars because of the coaching, because of the preparation. And you see 5 stars that just fizzle out, like Tate Martell, which is a perfect example. Great athlete, but he was a 5-star recruit out of high school, and he just retired from football and just couldn't get his feet under him. Unfortunately for him, wish him the best, but he tried and then just couldn't get off the ground. So it's not really about 4 or 5 stars, whatever it is. It's about a guy who understands the game and gets into coaching. So, Georgia just needs to lighten up and just be proud that you have a quarterback that says, I love this university. I trust my coach. I trust my team. I'm going to do it. I'm going to come back. So that's my first thing. As far as the playoff expansion, I think it should be 12 teams, not 16. And here's how I would do it. You got all 5 power conferences. Each one of those Power 5 conference champions automatically getting in. There you go. Then from the Power 5, you take basically 2 wild cards. Whoever's played a better strength of schedule looks better on paper. And yeah, the committee thing's continuously up for debate, but the wild cards gives you an opportunity to look at teams that just missed the door. And I'm going to come around to this real quick because I know you got to go real quick. And then obviously the other teams like the MAC and the AAC, give those guys a chance because look, Cincinnati played their butts off against Alabama, and Alabama didn't win convincingly. And if you get a team on the right day, in the right environment, in the right atmosphere, they could beat anybody. They really could, if they've shown that they're deserving of that chance. And look, Cincinnati might have had a terrible schedule, but again, I go back to Willie when he said Alabama had 3 or 4 different close calls this season. One more loss, they're not number 1. They may be out of the playoffs. So all 5 power conference teams, champions, automatically get in. And then you can take 2 wild cards from there. Then you can go to the lower divisions, maybe not as many if there's not as much conferences, but take those conference champions and a couple wild cards from them. That gives you 12 teams. Then turn the New Year's 6 bowls that have lost revenue from the college football playoff expansion. Those are all now college football playoff games. Once those games sort themselves out, you're left with 6 teams. So those two teams get a bye, get buys. So the other 4 teams will then play in a custom-made bowl game on a neutral NFL field. From that, those other 2 will then go and join them either at a home stadium game, depending on where they're at, or another neutral site, which will then lower it down to 4 teams and then 2 teams. Now, again, I mean, this is just kind of a sloppy copy, but it's the fact that, number one, you turn the New Year's Six Bowls into special games like they used to be years ago in, the awakenings of college football.
Yeah.
And
well, basically your system is similar
that,
to what is being proposed now. So I appreciate the call, but no buys. Buys don't work. I've explained that a million times. Check out my video or call back sometime and I'll let you know why buys don't work in college football. But I appreciate the call.
Not a problem, Mark. I know you got to get on that other podcast, so maybe we'll talk about it another time. But thanks, man, for taking the call. So
Thanks.
Have a wonderful night.
All right. Yeah, buys don't work. We don't want buys in college football playoffs. Otherwise, I like the 12-team concept. What I like about it is that it gives the conference champions the automatic bid and it gives them the bye. So if you're going to have buys, give them to the conference champions. So it makes the conference championship games important. You can't just say, well, they're going to get blown off by Alabama or Georgia because they know that they've made the playoff. Nope. They're going to have to play a first-round game. They should have to play it on the road. I can't get into it now. Got to go. Miami fans, head on over to Miami's channel. College football fans, if you want some great college football talk, you guys can talk, of course, in the live chat about whatever you want. So head on over to the Miami channel. We'll get cranked up as soon as I can within the next 2 or 3 minutes.